Hello everyone, I'm the Saxy Gamer, and today we're here for what could very well be the last of the leader spotlights, the thing that I say all the time and then they end up adding more leaders, but this time it actually might be the last, assuming that there are no further season passes for Civ, and we're finishing it off with João III of Portugal. So let's get right into things with his first ability, which is known as Porta do Cerco. So this one makes it so that his units will receive +1 sight. He also gets +1 trade route capacity when a civilization is met, and he also gets open borders with all city-states. This ability is actually pretty good. Whenever I did my first impressions video on this guy, I kind of underrated this one a little bit, but so the +1 sight applies to all units, obviously not just your naval ones, so it does give you a little bit more range to be able to see things and helps a little bit on the military front to be able to judge where you want to attack or things of that sort. But really this is very helpful later on in the game when you get battleships that have 3 range, because normally battleships would be 3 range 2 sight, so you need to have a unit there available to spot cities or other targets for them in order to be able to use that extra range. But with this ability they can just attack from 3 range and 3 sight because they have that extra sight, so you can attack people before they can even see you, which is a really strong thing to do. The +1 trade route capacity when a civilization is first met is also really strong, because this means if you go and explore early on in the game and meet a bunch of people, you can get a ton of trade routes super fast, and then there's also bonuses you get from your trade routes from the other ability that we'll talk about in just a little bit. So this synergy means that you can get a ridiculous amount of gold per turn really fast in the game, which is just going to snowball you to be able to then buy a bunch of buildings, buy a bunch of units, buy more traders, get more gold per turn, and just snowball super hard. So this extra trade route whenever you meet a civilization is very strong as well. The open borders with all city-states it's fine. I mean, honestly, the thing that I found it most useful for is exploring early on, because sometimes you'll get blocked by a city-state, but aside from that, it's not really that lucrative. Portugal's second ability is known as Casa da Índia, so this one makes it so that their international trade routes can only reach cities on the coast or with a harbor, but they do receive +50% bonus towards all of the yields that they provide. They also do have a bonus of 50% extra range over water and can embark over ocean tiles as soon as they are unlocked. So this one as well is pretty good. It just synergizes well with the fact that they get so many early traders, and +50% yields that are applying with trade routes is pretty good because it means you're going to get a lot of extra gold per turn. It's not quite as insane with some of the other yields like production or food, where you would normally only be getting 1, so then honestly 1.5 is not that big of a deal over 1, but it is still nice to get, and this does synergize with some of the policy cards that will give you some bonuses to your trade routes, or like democracy, which will give you food and production when you're trading with your allies. It does apply to those as well, which can make this quite strong in terms of giving you those extra yield. But as mentioned, the thing that makes this ability really good is just that it synergizes so well since you're able to get a ton of early trade routes. This makes it so that you can get a ton of gold per turn very early on in the game, and then as you get later in the game where your trade routes will provide more gold, and also you are able to use the Feitoria, which we'll talk about later on, this becomes even more beneficial when it just generates a ton of extra yields as a result. Now let's go ahead and start talking about Portugal's unique unit, which is the Nau, which is a replacement for the Caravel, and I'm going to try to go through some of the Portugal's unique things here quite fast because there are a few of them, so I don't want to take 10 years here. So the Nau, as I mentioned, is a replacement for the Caravel, and it has almost identical stats to the Caravel, being 55 melee strength and 4 movement. The only thing that is different in terms of its stats is that it does have a slightly lower maintenance cost, which is 2 gold per turn as opposed to 4 on the Caravel. The Nau does have 2 unique bonuses as well, so for one, it will start with a free promotion, so you can either choose to get extra combat strength against naval units or extra movement, so those are pretty good first promotions, and it can help you if you're going to buy a bunch of these to fight a naval war, or if you just want to use them to scout around, the extra movement can be good. It also does have 2 charges to build Feitorias, which we'll talk about right after this, so my overall opinion of the Nau is that it's fine. It's not really a particularly great unique unit, I don't think. I mean, the free promotion can be helpful because getting the extra combat strength against naval units the second that you build them means that you can actually start off with an edge over some other Caravels or things of that sort, but I do like the flexibility as well to be able to choose between that and movement, but obviously if you're fighting against opponents that already have promotions on their units, then it's not going to be, it's pretty much just going to be nullified. Really, the reason that why I like to build the Nau is just to use them to build the Feitorias, which can be quite good. So if you're going for a domination game, a naval domination game, then you can make use of the Nau quite well, but if not, you can still make use of it, but pretty much just as either a scout or a Feitoria producing machine. And speaking of the Feitoria, let's go ahead and talk about that right now. So this is a unique tile improvement that is unlocked alongside the Nau. So this will provide +4 gold and +1 production to the tile that it is put upon. But the catch with this is that it has to be built in another player or city-state's territory, and it has to be next to a bonus or luxury resource. You also cannot put 2 Feitorias next to each other. So you're probably wondering why you would want to give 4 gold and 1 production to another player on their tiles. And there is a reason. That's because the yield bonuses apply to all Portuguese trade routes to the city that the Feitoria is built in. This does stack up as well, so if you put 4 Feitorias in there and you have 4 trade routes going there, then you are all of a sudden going to be getting 64 bonus gold and 16 extra production as a whole, so you can obviously see how this is able to stack up quite well. The other thing with the Feitoria is that it is not removable by the other players, so you can kind of cheekily use these to block wonder placements or things of that sort. It's a little bit tricky to do that, but if you're able to predict it and you really think that someone's going to build a wonder in a certain spot, then you can use a Feitoria to block that wonder from being built. As a whole, I think that the Feitoria is really strong because of how much you can really stack up. So as I mentioned, if you're sending 4 trade routes to one city, then it gets progressively better. Each Feitoria is worth more. So if you send like 8 trade routes to one city, then each Feitoria is worth a lot of gold and a lot of production. And then building multiple Feitorias in a city can make that even more insane. So put as many of these down as you possibly can in the cities that you are sending a lot of trade routes to. I should also mention that these yields will get increased by Portugal's ability, so really you're getting 6 gold and 1.5 production from every trade route that is sent to a city with a Feitoria. And now let's take a look at the last of Portugal's unique things, and that is the Navigation School, which is a replacement for the university. So the Navigation School will provide you with the standard university bonuses, being, +4 science, +1 housing, plus a great scientist points per turn, things of that sort. But then on top of those standard university bonuses, it will also give you 1 great admiral point per turn, 25% bonus production towards all naval units in the city, and 1 science for every 2 coast or lake tiles that are present in the city. The Navigation School is ridiculously strong, so obviously the fact that it has the standard university bonuses means that it is, at base level going to be at least better than a university in every single case pretty much, because you're going to get extra great people points and production towards naval units, but the 1 science for every 2 coast or lake tiles is really insane. So this doesn't mean that they have to be worked, they just have to be owned by the city. So when you're playing Portugal and you build navigation schools, what I recommend you doing if you have a lot of gold per turn, which you probably will, is just buying all of the coast tiles that you possibly can in the city, because then this will immediately get your navigation school to the max science bonus, and this can sometimes be like 9 or even like 12 extra science per turn just from this coast bonus, which is really insanely good. Obviously, this is going to be better on naval maps like Archipelago or Island Plates, but if you are playing on one of those map types, or really regardless of that, anytime you're building this navigation school, buy all of the coast tiles immediately, so that way you get the full benefit from it, but you can get just a insanely high amount of science from this. So the navigation school is really good. Haven't even mentioned the plus 25% production towards naval units, but that's obviously just a very good production bonus that applies to a lot of units, so it as well is quite good. And now it is that time to talk about some of the strengths and weaknesses of João and the Portuguese in Civilization 6. So for the strengths, there are 2 that I think really stand out to me. So the first one is Portugal's ability to just get insane gold generation very early on in the game. So the fact that you get trade route slots every time you meet someone means that you can end up with 4 or 5 trade route slots before turn 50, and then you can have those trade routes going, and you can easily end up with over 100 gold per turn by turn 50. I believe in the game that I played on stream, I had over 1,000 gold by the Industrial Era, which was really good. 1,000 gold per turn by the Industrial Era, which is obviously pretty good. This then means that you can use this to do a lot of other things. So you can either get the promotion on Reina that allows you to buy districts and get a lot of districts out really fast. You can buy buildings in your districts, buildings in your city center, buy units to go on a domination spree. You can do a lot of stuff with gold, and the fact that they are able to capitalize on this so early on in the game means that it's going to be a huge power spike pretty much for the rest of the game. There's a lot of times where you'll be playing Portugal where you really won't have anything that you even need to actually produce with production, because you'll just be able to buy everything anyways. So this gold generation ability is really, really strong. The other big strength of Portugal that I think is that the navigation school can give you a lot of extra science if you're playing on a naval map. So as I mentioned, this can give you, like 7 or even like 11 or 12 extra science just from having a bunch of coast tiles. And as I recommended before, you should definitely just be buying all of the coast tiles that you can pretty much right after building the navigation school in order to capitalize on this bonus very early on. But the amount of extra science that you get from this thing is really, really strong, and it can mean that the second you hit the navigation school, even if you're not really focused focusing on science earlier on in the game, you'll be able to pretty much jump to the top of the leaderboard in science once you start getting these navigation schools out. Let's now talk about the weaknesses for Portugal, and I think that there really only is one, but it is a pretty big one, and that is Portugal is pretty bad on non-naval maps. So, as I mentioned, you're able to do all this stuff on naval maps like archipelago or island plates, but if you're playing on something like continents and islands, or, well, continents and islands is probably fine, but just regular continents or Pangea or that stuff where not all of your cities are going to be coastal, then you might have a bad time, because the balancing thing with Portugal is that you can only send international trade routes to other cities that are on the coast or have a harbor. So if you're playing on some of those non-naval map types, chances are there are going to be a lot of cities that are not on the coast and are not having harbors. So that's going to severely limit the number of trade routes that you can send out. It'll also limit the amount of extra science that you can get from the navigation school. So if you're going to play Portugal, I would recommend using a naval map in order to make them very fun, because otherwise you kind of nullify a lot of your bonuses, and some of the balancing effects for Portugal really start to come into play when you're playing on those non-naval maps. And now it is that time, perhaps for the very last time, to give out my tier rankings. So if you're new to this series, all that you need to know here is that these go on the standard tier ranking scale, with S tier being the highest, and then A, B, C, D, and F following, down in that order. So let's go ahead and give Portugal their domination rating, and I think that they deserve a B. They are a good domination civ. They definitely do have some stuff going for them, but they're lacking some bonuses that make them, really over the top strong. So in my opinion, I feel like Portugal has a lot of indirect buffs to domination, so that +1 sight range isn't going to play a huge role in all of your combat engagements, but in some of them it can be impactful. And as I mentioned, later on in the game, once you get ranged units that have 3 range, that +1 sight then turns out to be quite good. The other thing that makes them good for domination is that they really have no issues with gold per turn to cover maintenance costs of their units, and having that much gold per turn means that you can buy a lot of units and really just get a huge army out of nowhere just by buying, like 3 or 4 extra units, or having the gold to upgrade into units the second you hit the tech that unlocks the upgrades. So for these reasons, I think that Portugal is pretty good in domination victory and deserving of the B. As far as their science rating is concerned, I think that they deserve an A. They are a very good science civ, so they can play quite turtily, and they can just, go send out a bunch of trade routes, get a ton of gold per turn, and then use that to either buy campuses with Reina or also buy things like libraries, research labs, and navigation schools, which then just skyrockets your science up quite a bit. In addition to this, the navigation school, as I mentioned, it can give you a ton of extra science in every one of your cities if you're playing on a naval map, so this alone makes them pretty much an A-tier science civ, because whenever I was playing my games as Portugal over the past week or so, I have been not really doing that well in science prior to having the navigation school, and the second I hit the navigation school, all of a sudden I end up like top of the leaderboard in science, which is really good. So for those reasons, I think that they deserve an A in science. As far as cultural and religious victory are concerned, I think that they're going to deserve C's in both. You definitely can play either of those victory types, and you can do similar things that will work for science victory, like buying buildings or buying districts, but they are lacking that thing that really, accelerates them forward, like the navigation school for science. So for those reasons, I think that they deserve C's. You can just turtle up, get a bunch of gold and play one of these victory types, but I don't think it's the strongest victory type for them to go for. So for those reasons, I think they deserve C's in these 2 victory types. Diplomatic victory is up last, and I think that they deserve a solid B. They are a fairly decent diplomatic civ, just kind of like their domination rating. They don't really have direct bonuses to playing a diplomatic game, but they do have some indirect bonuses that end up making them quite good. So being able to get a lot of trade route slots early on means that you can start trading with people very early on, which then improves their view of you and improves your relations, which means you can declare friendship with them and then eventually form alliances as well, which is obviously helpful for a diplomatic game. You also can use a lot of the gold that you have to buy some diplomatic favor off of some of the other civs, which then can help you obviously influence some of the votes in the World Congress. Or the other thing is, if there are any aid requests, you will have a ton of gold to dump into those to win some diplomatic victory points that way. So for all of those reasons combined, I think that they deserve a B in diplomatic victory. And for their overall rating, I definitely think that they deserve an A. They are a very good civ. They're not quite on the level of being totally overpowered, and the main reason I think of this is just because of the fact that on non-naval map types, I really don't think that they are anywhere near as strong. Like, if you're playing on something like Pangea or Continents, I would probably say that they're like a C-tier civ, but on those naval map types, then they are easily an S-tier civ, so kind of averaging that out a little bit, I think that for overall, I think that they are deserving of an A. And, you know, my tier ratings are generally geared towards playing single-player games. So if you're going to play single-player games where you have control over the map type and stuff like that, definitely just set it to some naval map types and you'll have a lot more fun when you're playing Portugal. So thank you everyone for watching. I have been the Saxy Gamer. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you're looking for some more Civilization 6 content, feel free to subscribe. It's been a blast to make all of these leader spotlights, and I will be uploading, or I will be updating the leader tier list that I have on Google Drive, but I'm going to wait until April once all of the leader changes come out, because there's supposedly going to be a big balance patch in April. So once that comes out, I'll redo some of the leaders, the old leader spotlights, and also update the tier ranking spreadsheet, and then release that for all of you guys. So be looking out for that later on in April. Thank you everyone for watching, and goodbye.